morning, fourth graders, and welcome to another flipped lesson. Tonight's flipped lesson is going to be on drawing exact angles using a protractor. So again, we used the protractor when we were measuring angles, and we remembered that there are a few things on the protractor that are important. So quickly just revisiting that protractor before we take a look at our vocabulary words, it might kind of refresh our mind a little bit. So on our protractor, we have a zero line right here. And at the center of our protractor, we either have a line going down the center or this little dot. And then we have that zero line that continues all the way over, and it reaches 180 because we learned that a 180-degree angle is a straight line. On a protractor, we also learned that there are two scales. We have an inner scale and an outer scale. This is our outer scale right here because all the numbers are on the outside of the protractor. We also have an inner scale. This is the inner scale because the numbers are on the inner part of the protractor. Okay, let's get this protractor out of the way for right now so we can write down our definitions inside our math notebook. So here are the two definitions that are going to be important in drawing angles in our notebooks. Endpoint. Endpoint. It stops a line from continuing on in a given direction. So here's my example. Here is my endpoint. This round point right here, that's my endpoint because it stops this line from going in this direction. It doesn't go any further than that endpoint. It stops that line. The line will continue on this way because the endpoint has only stopped the line going in this direction. The second word that we're going to write inside our notebook is vertex. A vertex is a point at which two line segments or rays meet. And a vertex right here is that common endpoint which forms the angle. So here's my vertex, and you can see that this ray and this ray are connected, and they meet together to form the angle. Make sure you have this written inside your vocabulary section. Now let's get measuring. Now let's get to drawing. This section, we're going to draw an angle given the degrees without a ray. So what that means is we're going to be given the degrees that we have to draw our angle, which for this example is going to be 96 degrees. But we don't have anything else here to help us draw the angle. So what you're going to need to do is grab that handy dandy protractor that you're used to using, and make sure that you can still see the degrees that you have to use. See, even if I'm using this protractor, I can see through it, and I can see that I'm going to be drawing a 96-degree angle. All right, now we're ready to go. The first thing that you're going to do when you're drawing your 96-degree angle is you're going to create your vertex. That vertex is where the two rays are going to meet. So that's going to be in the center of my protractor, so I'm going to put that center line. What I just did is I drew my vertex in the center of the protractor right here. And again, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to always tend to favor this right-hand side of the protractor. So after I've drawn my vertex at the center of my protractor, I'm going to draw an end point right over here where it says 180, because I know that 180 is also saying 0 here, because if I were to go 10 points backwards on my protractor scale, from 10 all the way down to this line would be 0. So this is my 0 on the inner track. So I'm going to put my end point here. After I put my vertex in the center. And then I'm going to go up my protractor on the inner scale, because this is where my 0 is, and I'm going to count or stop at 96 degrees. So I have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and then here's where it becomes tricky. So I have 90 here, and I'm going to count by ones until I get to 96. So I have 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, and 96. And I'm going to be super careful where I draw that second end point. So my second end point is right next to my 95, or that midway point in between 90 and 100. Because I know 96 is right next to or right past 95. Okay, so again, I have my vertex in the center. I have my end point down here by 0 on the inner scale. And then I counted all the way up the inner track, and I stopped at 96. And I went up and I drew my second end point. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my protractor, and I'm just going to connect these dots to form a line segment. So as carefully as I can, I'm going to connect the vertex to the first endpoint. And again, you can see I just made a mistake. I have to be really careful. I'm going to go right against this straight edge and connect that so it's a nice straight line segment. Then I'm going to go up, and I'm going to connect these two line segments. Again, very, very, very carefully. And now I can see that this right here is a 96-degree angle. Notice after I drew my angle, I even labeled my angle with the degrees on the inside. I want you to do the same in your homework tonight. Now let's take a look at a 15-degree angle. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my protractor down so that I can still see the degrees that I want to draw. So my angle is going to be 15 degrees now. The first step that I do is I draw my vertex. I just fill in that little tiny dot at the center of my protractor, and that's going to be my vertex. That's where it's going to connect my two line segments. This time, let's go on this side of the protractor so I can see my 0. I'm going to draw my end point at the 0. And after I do that, I'm going to follow the outer scale up till I get to 15 degrees. So I have my outer scale, and I'm going to count 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And I'm going to draw my other end point at 15. I'll be really careful. After I drew both endpoints and my vertex, I'm going to move my protractor and connect those endpoints back to my vertex very, very carefully. And that right there is a 15-degree angle. And again, I even labeled that angle. The last one that we're going to do together without a ray is going to be 118 degrees. I'm going to do this one a little bit faster for those friends who are moving very quickly through this video. So again, I'm going to favor the right-hand side of my protractor because I'm right-handed. So I'm going to draw my vertex in the center of my protractor. I'm going to draw my first endpoint out here by the 0. And then I'm going to count all the way up the inner track, because again, the 0 is over here, but on the inner track, all the way up to 118 degrees. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110. And I know that 118 is 2 away from 120 going backwards. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to go backwards 2. So I have 120, 119, 118, and I'm going to draw my second end point. And then I'm going to connect my end points together very carefully. And then I'm going to label this angle as 118 degrees. So again, boys and girls, that was drawing angles given the degrees without a ray. Now let's take a look at how to draw angles given the degrees and a single ray. Now what I mean by that is they tell you that they want you to draw a 26-degree angle, but they already give you the base ray. So you have to figure out where that second ray or that second end point is going to go. So what you do with this is you take your handy dandy protractor, you line it up with the vertex already because this is your base ray. And again, this goes back to how to measure angles. You make sure that that vertex is in the middle of your protractor. See how it's in the middle? Put it right over that vertex. And then I make sure that my ray extends all the way down the zero line. And this looks pretty good. And I remember that I'm going to be drawing a 26-degree angle. So I'm going to count using the outer scale. 10, 20, 25, and 26. And I'm going to draw my second end point. After I draw that second end point, all I'm going to do is pick up this protractor and connect the end point down to that vertex. So now this is a 26-degree angle, and I can even make this a ray instead of a line segment just by adding the arrow to the end instead of the end point. Now let's do a 120-degree angle given a single ray. So here's my ray already. I'm going to put my protractor over that ray, right on top of the vertex, and I'm going to straighten out the bottom so it's right on my line. It's right across my zero right here. And now we're pointing on the inner track, so I'm going to be counting all the way to 120 using the inner track. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120. So I'm going to go ahead and put my end point at 120, and it's okay. I went into my other angle that I drew. That's okay. And then I'm going to turn my protractor around, and I'm going to connect my end point to my vertex. And again, I want to make that an arrow, and then I want to label this 120 degrees. The last one that I'm going to draw, the last angle, is 165. Again, I said that I favored the right-hand side because I'm right-handed. So I'm going to use this ray. I'm going to follow it right on the zero. Make sure it's nice and straight. All right. Because it's on the inner side, it's pointing to zero on the inner scale. So I'm going to count all the way up. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130, 140, 150, 160. And then I find the midway point between 160 and 170, which is right here. And I'm going to draw my second end point. And then I'm going to connect that end point to my vertex. Again, making sure that I'm very carefully doing it. And then I'm going to label 165 degrees. So that's how you draw an angle given the degrees and a single ray. Now, what I want you to do, boys and girls, tonight to practice on your own, I want you to use your protractor and draw the following angles. So you have a 60-degree angle that you're going to draw in your notebook, a 45-degree angle that you're going to draw in your notebook, and last but not least, a 175-degree angle. This seems extremely close to a straight angle. Just make sure it's not a straight angle because it's 5 degrees away from being a straight angle. Take your time, have fun, and